All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about finding and securing your location. So even if you're doing a mobile or telehealth model, it's still important to know this, especially if you may plan to open up a brick and mortar location in the future. And so today we're going to be talking about understanding a shared suite versus a standalone location, comparing first generation and second generation spaces, and securing a location without overcommitting. Now, share this course. Let's help more NPs and RNs build freedom through ownership. If you use your invite link, you will get a 40% commission if they purchase from us in the future. And then also warning there, this is the most important video in the entire course, especially if you're going to be signing any sort of lease or anything like that in the future. This is the biggest purchase that you will probably make as far as startup costs go when it comes to launching your clinic. Also, pro tip, watch the video at 1.75x speed as it will help you get through the video faster and start making those steps to launch your wellness clinic. So first and foremost, the shared suite. So the shared suite typically includes a treatment room, common areas, utilities, and basic infrastructure, right? So it's very helpful in that way because all of these things are included. These spaces often come with lower upfront costs and shorter commitments. This model significantly lowers your startup costs and your financial risk. Shared suites reduce build out needs and allow faster clinic launch. And limitations may include restricted branding, limited scheduling flexibility, and shared resources. So I kind of mentioned this in some earlier videos. When we started Pure Health and Wellness, we started in a shared suite. And again, we had 2 rooms and we shared a common lobby. And then there were other businesses or operators inside of the same space with us. And so that's typically what a shared suite looks like. And so you'll have treatment rooms, the common areas will come in there. A lot of times you don't have to pay for utilities. They're typically included, and you have some basic infrastructure things in place, such as Wi-Fi. Usually it'll be a printer somewhere. You may even have a shared front lobby person that will direct people as far as helping them find your business and all sorts of things like that. So it's very helpful and a good way for you to kind of jump out there, get your feet wet before having to pay a ton of money for doing things like a complete standalone wellness clinic. And again, ultimately, this lowers your upfront costs. You're not having to get in a super long 3 to 5 year lease like you would if you were doing a standalone location. And so I always recommend this model if you're just getting started because it does have lower startup costs and you don't have a lot of financial risk. And if for any reason that you need to stop, you can without taking a huge fall. And a lot of times you don't even need to do any build out whatsoever, but if you do, it's very, very light. You're only having to spend maybe $1,000 or $2 to do it. And it allows you to launch really, really fast, right? Usually, I'm going to be honest with you, this part takes the longest when it comes to finding a location, especially if you're doing a full standalone location, because a lot of times you will have to do things like a build out and it takes a while to find something that's good for you. So this actually makes it really, really quick. And so if you're wanting to get started fast, this is, again, a very good way to do so. Now, we talked about this briefly in another video, but there are some limitations around a shared suite, and you do have some restrictions around branding. Obviously, you won't have a sign on the front of the building a lot of times. And so, you don't get to brand yourself for drive-by or walk-by traffic. Even inside of the building, you may not be able to put up banners or things like that in front of your doors, stuff like that, just because they may have some restrictive rules just for people walking around and things like that. So you do keep that in mind. It's not the end of the world by any means, but those restrictions are typically in place. There is some limited scheduling flexibility in some places. So if you do have a shared lobby or a shared suite in space, and let's say you're operating in another clinic, for instance, there are cases that I've heard of people doing that. They may only be open from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., but you may want your hours to be until 7, from 11 to 7, in which case you may not be able to do that, or you may have to do some workarounds to make that work. So also keep that in mind. And again, you have shared resources. And so you will have to manage those shared resources. And that I'll give you an example. When we were in our shared suite, sometimes if it was very busy during the day, the Wi-Fi would not work as well because everyone was connected to it on their phones. Also, they had their laptops connected to it. And so there wasn't a lot of bandwidth for everyone. So when we were to go to do our payments, our system wouldn't always connect to our payment terminal because it was also on the Wi-Fi. And so these are kind of some things that could be limitations or could be nuisances around having a shared suite. So a standalone brick and mortar. So before I do that, I want to show you this again. I want to go in here and show you what a shared suite looks like. I showed this on a previous video, but I want to show it again just in case you didn't see it. But so this is in Houston. There is actually a wellness shared co-working space in Houston. I'm not sure if every city has one of these, but just about every city for sure has a co-working space of some kind. But this ultimately gives you a sense of what these look like. So for instance, this is the shared lobby that everyone would use here. And then as you can see, these rooms, they have all these different rooms, and these are what you can rent out in order to set up your wellness clinic. In our case, we had both an IV room and a exam room that were side by side. So we rented both rooms. And so you could do something like that as well. But ultimately, this is what a shared suite looks like. If you've never seen one before, they structure them all differently, right? Not all of them look the same as far as amenities go. And so you can kind of look around and get a better sense of what is offered in your city. But I just wanted to give you a sense of what it looks like. So let's hop back over to the slides and talk about the standalone brick and mortar location. So a standalone brick and mortar location. So standalone locations typically include private space, include exclusive branding, and full operational control. So this is completely your space. There's not another business operating inside of this space. That's whether it's in an area, on some land by itself, or if it's inside of a shopping center. Either case, that's kind of what I mean by standalone brick and mortar location. Obviously, you'll have your own sign out front, decals on the door, potentially on your windows. You might even have your name on a sign up at the front of the property. All of those things are possible with these locations. And you have full operational control, right? Because it's completely your space once you sign that lease. Now that comes with its pros and its cons, but you can build it out however you want to build it out to help with the patient experience or to add additional services. So these spaces require the clinic to manage utilities, build out, and maintenance. So obviously these can be a bit more expensive because you will have to get electricity. Water is usually included in your triple net expenses, but you will have to buy your internet, and you may have to have a phone line and things like that. Additionally, you have to do a build out typically. Now we'll talk about first, second, and second generation spaces here in a second. But in our case, we had to add flooring, we had to paint the walls. There was some electrical work we needed to do. And then even when we talk about maintenance, for instance, we had to get them to replace the AC, but if we would have signed the agreement before we realized that the AC was not in good working order, then once we signed that lease, that would have been on us. And so that's another part of it. If anything goes wrong after signing the lease, it's from a maintenance perspective, most of the time you're going to be held accountable for it, and you're going to have to be the one that replaces it. So standalone locations allow for greater customization and long-term scalability. So it's definitely helpful in that regard. Like I said, you can add more walls, take more walls down, add sinks, cabinets, whatever you need to create the type of atmosphere that you need to for your services. And then if you do get a clinic that has multiple rooms, you can always scale and add, whether that's more providers, more staff, more services, a chirotherapy machine, so on and so forth, as far as what you can do with it. Now, this comes with higher costs, longer leases. I've said this multiple times at this point. Most standalone leases are going to be 3 to 5 years. So again, it is a lot longer lease. So you do have more risk involved, longer timeline, increased early stage risk. So keep that in mind. Also, it's a longer process of getting these set up just because there's so much around the responsibilities of having one. So usually the process of finding one, getting a lease signed, negotiating, and all those things tend to be a lot longer. And because you typically do have to do a build out, getting into the clinic and actually starting to see patients takes some time as well, because you have different types of delays. You need contractors and so on. And so again, there's a lot around this. I'm not saying all this to deter you from doing it. I'm saying it just so you know. what comes with it. But again, there's still a lot of pros to having it. Branding yourself builds a lot of trust with your patients. It's your space. It's definitely something you can feel proud of. You're not having to deal with other businesses adjacent to you, because it's just like moving into an apartment or even a neighborhood. You never know who your neighbors might be. You might love them, but you might not love them. And so again, a standalone location is definitely a great thing, but I want you to keep in mind, the different limitations that it does come with. So let's talk about our first generation versus a second generation space. This is going to apply to a standalone location. So first generation spaces require full build out in longer timelines. So a first generation space is, if you've ever been driving down the road, you see a new shopping center open. And if you drive by the windows, you will see inside, like there's literally nothing, right? There's no sheetrock, there's just bare floor. You can kind of see all what they call the guts of the building. That's going to be a first generation space. And so you have to do a full build out. You have to get an architect. You have to get city plans. You got to lay the floor, put up the sheetrock, run the plumbing, run the electricity. And so these things take a lot longer time. Anytime you're going to be involving the city, that's going to take time to get permits. Again, you're going to need an architect likely to do the blueprints of everything, and then actually getting the contractors in there and doing each layer of the process takes time. So that's what comes with a first generation space. These spaces involve higher upfront costs and a lot greater uncertainty, just because you are going through the process of building this place out from pretty much scratch. Second generation spaces were previously used for medical or office purposes, right? So this is different from the first generation spaces, that a business was previously occupying this space. So there are typically floors already in place, sheetrocks up, plumbing's been ran, electricity's been ran. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's been done the way that you want it to be done, but it at least gives you something to work with. So you're not having to make a bunch of major changes and incur a bunch of higher cost. Before we move on to this, I do want to say one more thing about first generation spaces. Typically, when you go into these shopping centers, you get a lot more incentives because they do understand that this is a complete first generation space. So that does help you in regards to doing one of those. But even then, it still is a higher cost option than a second generation space. Now, even with a second generation space, they do understand that you are a new business. So there are still incentives that they will give you in order to make this space look the way that you want it to look. Things like tenant improvement. So second generation spaces allow faster and lower cost clinic launches. So especially where you go move into a space that's exactly the way you need it. Let's say it was a medical office, for instance, and they have everything laid out in a way that would align with a wellness clinic, then you don't have to do too much. And that was kind of our situation. We moved into an old chiropractic office. So as far as, the layout, the rooms, were everything we needed. We really just replaced the floor, repainted the walls. We did take down some walls like for our front desk and stuff to look the way we wanted to, because it was a very old chiropractic office. And we did some little aesthetic changes and things like that, but we didn't have to come in here and rerun a bunch of plumbing and electricity and so on and so forth. And so that was beneficial because we weren't coming out a bunch of money. So next we want to talk about securing the location. So you want to be very careful about this. You want to review your lease terms or shared space agreements thoroughly before signing them. You want to be very thorough with this. Landlords are not advocating for you. They never do that. They never will do that. I would be very, very surprised by that. So make sure you review those lease terms. Make sure you ask questions. Don't just go signing it, because honestly, it is an emotional process in the sense of, you're starting the business. You're going to be very happy that you're going to get this started. It's going to be very easy to be like, oh, yep, this is the one I want, and just sign right away. And then when something breaks that you didn't realize that you needed to cover, now you're on the hook for that. So definitely review these things. Also, avoid long lease commitments up front and expensive tenant improvements early. So if you're just getting started, I always recommend do a shared suite. If you're going to do a standalone brick and mortar, do a second generation, and avoid super long lease commitments, because they might try to convince you to do a 5-year lease and say, hey, you're going to get this or that if you do this. But I would avoid those like the plague. Do the shortest lease you can do up first. And then if you love the place, you can always re-sign when the time comes. And again, don't do a bunch of expensive tenant improvements early. This kind of goes back to what I was talking about when we discussed startup costs. If you can delay some things, go ahead and delay them until you're building revenue in this new space that you're in. And then you can add some of those things. For instance, we were going to add a nice fancy door to the lobby, and we decided to put that off till later because we did not want to incur that cost for just no reason when the door that was there was perfectly fine. So that's kind of what I mean by, don't try to do a whole lot if you don't have to. But again, it's your vision. I'm not trying to convince you out of your vision, just trying to provide you with some insight. You want to confirm permitted use aligns with medical or wellness services. So you want to make sure, different cities have different zoning laws and different restrictions around businesses. So ultimately, this is pretty much saying, make sure that you're permitted to operate in that space. Houston's a bit more lackadaisical, whereas some other some other cities are not as lackadaisical around these types of things. So just make sure before you sign your lease that you are permitted to operate wellness clinic services in there. Another thing that could come up, let's say there's another medical business in your shopping center or office building or whatever, and they may have some type of contract in place with the landlord that says another medical or wellness business cannot operate in this shopping center. So for instance, you just want to make sure you don't run up against something like that. Also, get all terms in writing before committing to the space. Now, I don't foresee any reason why this stuff wouldn't all be in writing, but let me explain where that could happen. So let's say you talk to the landlord and they say to you, hey, for example, if you come into a space, you go to a shopping center, you see all the signs that are out front of every business, and you don't like them. And you say to the landlord when they're showing you the building, hey, can I do a different kind of sign? What a landlord will do sometimes is say yes to you about a lot of these things. Oh, yeah, totally. You can do a different sign. It doesn't have to be that color. It doesn't have to be the same design as everyone else. And they'll say that in order to get you to sign the lease. But if you don't get that in writing, then when the day comes for you to put up your sign, they're going to invoke the lease if the lease differs from that agreement that you made when they were showing you the space. So that's an example. Now, I don't foresee any reason why there would be no lease at all. But again, definitely make sure that there is some sort of lease that both of you need to sign and be held accountable to. Because again, landlords are not your friends. I promise you that landlords are not your friends. So some key takeaways: only secure location if your clinic model requires one, right? If you're mobile, telehealth, there's no reason to have a clinic location. Shared suites and second generation spaces reduce risk and help you launch faster. Standalone locations should be intentional and financially justified. And then lastly, if you enjoyed this course, please let me know in the community. I want to make these things better for you. I want to make sure you're getting value from this. So please let me know how you're feeling about this course. If you need help to move faster or avoid costly mistakes, please book a call with me. We help you with entity setup, compliance, medical director matching, legal and clinical documents, EMR, marketing, and so much more. For this video specifically, we do help you look for clinic spaces. We do help you understand lease agreements, the stuff that you can negotiate versus what you can't negotiate, things you need to redline, professionals that you need to get involved when you do find a space, and all sorts of insights around that. We also show you our lease agreement so you can see exactly some things that we redline and what's typically included in a lease agreement. So again, we can help you in a lot of ways. Now on this call, there's no pressure. What we'll go through is where you are now, what you're looking to do, and then we'll at the very least give you some practical steps that you can take right away to launch your wellness clinic. And then any case you do need our help, we'll tell you exactly what we offer and how we can help you. So I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for watching the video, and I'll see you in the next one.